Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to another cup of joy with Elizabeth and Lane. We are circling back around to the professional well-being sphere this today, which includes career and finance. And I'm going to tell y'all now, as I've told you before, I don't look at these. Lane puts them together and I just come and freestyle that way I'm fresh and not thinking too much. And I feel like Lane might be trying to come for me with this topic. So we're going to see, but I feel like Lane's up to something. So go ahead and kick us off, Lane.
um yeah, well, maybe it was subconsciously to come for you, but the topic today is workaholism. I never really know how to say that, or if there even really is a real way to say it. I don't know if it's really a real word, but workaholism, like being a workaholic. So just some basic like background. 48% of Americans consider themselves to be workaholics. And that's a stat that I pulled from a few different places. It came up. So that's quite a few of us, almost half. So that's that. And again, like when you say they consider themselves to be workaholics, that doesn't necessarily mean that 48% of us are workaholics. It's a little bit objective, but there are some ways that you can kind of tell whether you are or not. And we're going to talk through that a little bit more. It definitely occurs on a spectrum, workaholism. There are true work addictions. So there's on the far end of the spectrum, like you can actually be addicted to work. You can feel the same almost like withdrawal symptoms as you would if you were addicted to a substance, where if you're not at work, you're actually more stressed out and you're more worried, or you're more experiencing the negative symptoms that some people experience while they're at work. So that is kind of like a far end of addiction. But there's also just spending too much time at work and spending too many like hours of your day at work. And there are other signs, of course, as well, working more than you plan to work, working through your lunch hour, getting, like I said, getting stressed when you're not at work, developing or putting your personal priorities behind work, working when you're sick, being too accessible to your colleagues, hiding work from your loved ones, poor boundaries. Yeah, I mean, it sounds crazy, but like it is as if it's
I'm
real.
laughing because I may or may not have done that before.
I know. I actually, yeah, I could see you doing that. But it is like that. It's funny, but it's also like that is what many people who are struggling with addiction do when they're using. It's like you hide it because you know that it's a problem, and that
Mhm.
that person, your loved one or whoever, is concerned about you and wouldn't want you to be doing that. So obviously, imbalance overall is just, there's plenty of other things we could list out as
Mhm.
signs of this, but overall just being imbalanced. So being unwell in other areas of your life is another indication. So, you know, we can we know that this is something that many of us struggle with, especially, we broadcast this on LinkedIn. Like a lot of people who are successful in their professional sphere may be struggling with being a workaholic. And of course, this looks different depending on your industry. We'll get into that a little bit. We have our guest here today, Amber, who's going to share a little bit about what this might look like with helping professionals and people who might be in the helping industry, and how it doesn't always show up the same way.
Mhm.
So that's just my introduction on it. And I guess, Liz, I know I know you probably have a lot to say on this, and I apologize if this feels like calling you out, but
Whatever.
I do
Whatever.
it might be relevant and or helpful to our members and people listening who have struggled with this or do struggle with this currently. And just talking through how, being a workaholic, it sometimes seems like that's the only way to be successful in your career. And so it's figuring out, how do you balance the desire you have to work this hard and to be working as much as you are and to be successful, but to also be sustainable and be well in
Mhm.
other areas. So, what are your thoughts initially?
Yeah, I have a ton of them. I feel like we need 2 episodes. Couple of thoughts. First of all, is that I would just encourage folks that you might not identify with the word workaholic. So I would just say, challenge yourself to listen in, regardless of whether that term resonates for you, because I think there's a lot of different terms people could use to describe this, and I'm sure there are folks who maybe fall into this who are not identifying with that word. The other thing that stands out to me is this is super loaded because, as you all know, I always want to get to the why behind things, because to me, you need to know what's behind it in order to clearly understand it. Because when I think about the quote unquote signs you just went over, Lane, those are things a lot of us are experiencing, but I don't know that it's because you're a quote unquote workaholic. So, when I think of this term workaholic, I think about, and I think you're meaning to talk about people who are more intentionally like prioritizing work and are valuing it in a certain way and viewing it in a certain way. But I think that there are, and even with those folks, there are reasons for that, which then would cause us to all potentially land in various different subcategories, potentially, in which the answer or potential suggestions for potentially a resolve or whatnot would change, or be different. So, first of all, we live in a society where, unfortunately, we are still um, subscribing to a belief system and a way of living that indicates that your career and your work really is your identity. And so, if you're alive in the world today, it would be hard not to be thinking that way. I think, Lane, one of the things I always appreciate about these episodes with you is that we're in two different generations. And you all will hear from Amber in a moment, but Amber and I are in the same generation. And so we are closer to the generation in which this belief system was born in, right? Or perhaps they would say they inherited it as well. So we know that, generationally speaking, there is certainly a new age perspective that's evolving and coming to the forefront that says, we want balance. But that's a new word, right? That's a new term. And I know for myself and Amber coming up, that wasn't something that was even proposed as an option. Never even had the opportunity to potentially even think about that. And so some of this just is that you live the way you live because you grew up being taught that that's the right thing and that's the good thing and that's the moral thing and that's the ethical thing. So it's what you do. Some of us are struggling with bills, right? And you just got to go hard because the way this world is set up and the way these costs are, right? You better be working a whole bunch. Some of us are doing it because we're running from some personal realities, and it's better and easier to be at work and deal with whatever goes on there than it is to deal with our personal stuff. Some of us are at a workplace that's highly unhealthy. And if you don't operate this way, you won't have a job, right? So as we move into it, I just want to throw out there, first of all, that we know and honor that there are different ways in which you get to adopting this type of behavior, and we know that some of this is on us as individuals to make different decisions, and some of it is that we are operating within a system or reality that we may not have as much choice as we'd like to have. So as we get into this, because I feel like this could be a very sensitive topic, I want to make sure that folks know we're not here to judge or criticize, because regardless of how you're showing up, every human is doing the best that they can in every moment that they're alive. That's what we do. We show up every day, and whatever our best was is what you see. So if you see a hot mess, that was that person's best at that moment. If you see them living their best life, then that was their best at that moment. So we do know and honor that you all are living the way you know how right now. And so, and again, if ever there were an episode to say, and this is why we created Joy Society, I think this very much highlights it. And this is why our target population is professionals, leaders, and business owners, because folks, in this space tend to identify with their career and with their work. And um, there's a lot that comes with that. And this is loaded. Like, you will not leave this episode and have all the answers, I can assure you, because
Mhm.
this is way too complex of a topic. So, Amber, I will pause and give you a moment to share your 2 or 5 cents.
Well, it's about 3 cents, maybe. We're in the middle. We're gonna be in the middle. Well, there was a couple things that came up. I'm always taking my notes down here. And when I think about times when we're working a lot and we're like, okay, this is like you said, the term can be used or not. Is what am I gaining from it? What is my need from it? So a lot of times when we're moving into something, we're like, oh, I'm getting something from it. We're
Wait a minute,
doing
Amber, are you giving us solutions already? Because you be loving solutions.
No,
Are
I'm
you
just
already
saying,
going there?
I'm not
Okay,
going
'cause,
for solutions. I'm
we're
saying
not ready yet.
we're asking these questions. We're doing
Okay,
things because we're getting something from it.
got it.
And
So
when
so you're saying, in order to kind of get a sense for where you might be within all this, you suggest that we start with asking ourselves the question, why are we doing it? What are we getting from
right,
it? Got it.
right, because we're getting fulfilled in some kind of way,
Mhm.
right? And especially when we're talking about that helper, right? Talking about that the helping profession. And we often will get into this mindset of, oh, they need me.
Mhm.
They need me to do A, B, and C, right? They need me to connect into this resource. They need me to, oh, they need me to uh, call back, whatever the case is, right? They need all of these things. We then move because we feel like I'm needed. So sometimes they're still
Yeah.
fulfilling. We're getting some fulfillment in that. So it's
Well, you
interesting.
know what? On that point, I think we get fulfillment in all of it, even when it's
Yes.
full blown chaos, because we talk. I can't remember how long ago that was, Lane, that we talked about. I think it was codependency, and just how, like, when we help other people, even if you're not in a helping
Mm,
profession, when you do stuff, if you're the one who came through in the clutch at work, like, even if you hate it and you hate your boss, and you hate that they call you every time, it feels good to be able to say and take the credit for being the one who came through in the clutch, being the one who stayed late. And regardless of all that's laced in it, there's no negating that the human mind and the human spirit and the human heart is just like, yes, and it was me. No matter what.
Right.
yes, I agree. I did it. Like, look at me, you know. So I think there's definitely anything that we do, we get some gratification from it. But the interesting part is when they uh, think of it as a badge of honor. you know, that often I'll see, well, I had to put in this 80 hours this week. You know what I mean? Like this whole badge, like I'm a great worker. Look at me. I've done this work, right? And forgetting all the other things that might have got kind of neglected, unfortunately, because you did that really well. But what about these other pieces? So there's a lot that comes with how do we balance this. So I know we'll get to solutions later, but
Yeah, no,
every time
Amber,
you talk, notes, keep
yeah,
talking.
I think the generational thing is important to discuss here too, just because like I feel like the idea of being more balanced is so new. To your point, Liz, that like when I think about like my dad, for instance, having worked his whole life in this world where it was just what you did to like spend 60 hours a week at your job or more, and then and even like going back further where it's like the kind of the sole income earner of a family, and how that kind of level of pressure to like make sure that you are earning and like bringing home money for the family. I think that adding that in, and those like kind of like societal expectations as well, it just leaves less room to like question what like is there another option in this. And then it's like you on top of that you pile in like the corporate culture and workplace culture, and not even corporate, to your point, Amber, like helping industries. Helping industries can also kind of be more have like their own kind of issues with this culture, as well as
Well, I think
Amber was discussing.
I do think all of this is it's there. There are several roles or
Mhm,
industries in which you could see some nuance. You spoke to your dad. I know your dad's an attorney. It's funny. I
mhm,
just had breakfast with an attorney this morning, who's from your dad's generation,
mhm,
and just the that we were talking about some of the shifts they've made in
mhm,
their policies and the way they operate their firm, and it is 100% about the drive, and they have made the decision that we're going to recruit people who fully identify with performance and work as a priority. Like that is their recruiting
mhm.
model. We literally, I just came from breakfast talking about this, and so that and we and when I thought about it when he said it, I was like, well, there are plenty of people out here who are not looking for quote unquote balance and harmony, to
Mhm.
which that type of environment is attractive to them, and I don't judge that. Those of you who know me or have listened to enough episodes know that I'm definitely a hard driver, and for me work has been a primary component for me in my life, and for me it's just there's dreams that I have, there's things that I feel fully confident that I can accomplish, and I've been about the business of doing that. So I do think every many industries will have nuances as to what drives this being um a critical or drives this for the way in which it impacts you, right? So you gave the example of helping professionals. That's a space where it is expected. Matter of fact, because I'm doing this keynote, I'm looking
Mhm.
through the ethics, the social work code of ethics, and it literally outlines you will do all these things for other these people at the sacrifice of yourself. That is written within the code of ethics, right? And so comparable it shows up and looks different than what you would see in a another workspace, but yet they're the same, right? So I
Mhm.
think different industries, different even roles, right? If you think about a warehouse kind of a role or a C-suite role or
Mhm.
just different roles. So I think outside of our individual realities where this impacts, how it how we show up to it, each role and or industry and or employer is going to make this show up different for different people.
Right. I think that that's so true, and I love that, just bringing in a little bit more of like the environmental factors that play into this, because again, like of course, like it is individual, and it is a thing that you can, that we're speaking about as if it's like, this is something that an individual is struggling with, but it's like there's also so many other factors that play in to make this kind of even be possible, and to make the idea of being a workaholic even, um oh, you can't hear me?
No, you're fine. We can hear
Oh,
you. Go ahead.
oh, sorry. Yeah, so just basically like it's more than just you, I think, and I think like the our culture and the expectations based on industry, based on all of the things that Liz and Amber just mentioned, all of those things play in to make it so that being a workaholic is almost glorified and appreciated. And I think what I have always personally struggled with is how do I show and be devoted to my job and my career without being a workaholic. And I think that's where I'm interested to hear your thoughts, both of you, because I think, when you read these, like, and to your point, Liz, it's like employers would love to have someone on their team that's like, they get stressed when they're not at work. They like don't take real vacations, like they work when they're sick. Like, of course, like that sounds great for an employer. And I think, like, as employers in this climate, it is difficult because we're basically telling people nowadays like we're valuing other things too. And so how do you, and we know, obviously, as Joy Society, we know that you're going to be a better employer, or a better employee if you are more balanced. Like, we know that. But I think to get to that point, it does take some intention, and it takes some just figuring out how do you stay motivated in your career and stay as a like as a hard worker without it being at this level of like imbalance and workaholism, because that's something that I've tried to balance in my life, and I don't know that I've like found the right answer.
Well, I think that's a loaded question, Lane, because don't you hate when people say it depends? Like, thanks, that's so helpful.
Well,
But,
yeah,
but,
but
but,
it's
but as we just discussed, it does depend on a lot of things. Depends on where you work and who you work for, right? It depends on what you have going on in your world, and you're younger, you're still finding your way of your identity, right? And what matters to you. So some of this is about discovering what matters to you. It's so crazy that we're having this conversation because I literally just had like some ahas I had to process right before we got on, and revisiting for me what matters to me, what's negotiable for me, and what's not. Sometimes along the journey, I'll say as a person who's much older but only looks 21, that you intentionally make some sacrifices, show up and give more, because that's part of the journey of being able to progress in your career, right? There are other times, and this even speaks to the season you're in, right? So I'm at a different season where, not to say that there aren't still situations in which I'm proving or earning some respect, but they're way less often, right? And I'm at a place in my career and life and financial reality that I'm measuring this different, right? And am willing to do and not do certain things. And so continuing to have clarity about what matters to me allows me to then make decisions about what business ventures I'm getting into. The same way, if you're an employee, you're going to decide who you want to work with or for, right? Because that alignment matters. And so we could judge this law firm I'm speaking of to say, oh my god, they're just trying to go recruit all the people who just want to work like crazy. But there are people who do want to work like crazy. That's the space they're in. That's the life they live. That's the priority, at least for now, right? Especially if you think about in a certain industry where that's the road. You got to prove and have this performance, getting to a certain point where you can speak to your resume. And for some of us, the resume was like where you worked, but it's also what projects you completed, the caliber of project you worked on, the caliber of client you worked with. And so there is a level of sacrifice involved. And I will say, although I love you and your peeps, Lane, uh, there this idea of balance that you all have showed up and kicking down doors about, while I without question, and this is part of my brand, I believe that um there was and is room to grow in the sense of sort of reimagining what it means to be professional, what it means to be successful. I would also say that I believe that some of this movement of we want to be balanced is not realistic. That's not the way this journey goes. There is a season of sacrifice and a season of grind that is part of the journey to learn and grow as an upcoming professional in order to get to the level that you want to get to. And that's not necessarily saying that you want to come be some big boss making a bunch of money, but even just the skill sets that you learn. You part Some of the greatest skill sets learned are the personal and self leadership skill sets that come when you're under pressure and when you have to balance a lot and when you got to come through in the clutch for your employer on a weekend and a late night, and when you've got 50 million things going on, and it would appear as if there's too much to do and not enough people and not enough time, but we pull it off anyway. Those are some of the iron sharpen iron moments that really not only bring you to a level within your profession but also your personal reality, right? And so I think some of the frustration that folks may be seeing with their leaders, the leaders of their organizations, is that I'll say it, and we're not going to all agree. That we've gone a little bit too far on this balance thing. Like that, there's some realism about what it takes to even accomplish things in this difficult life. Like it is not balance is not a thing, and you all know we are very adamant about the fact that Joy Society doesn't promote balance because the concept itself is questionable. We look for harmony, but as I've stated in many of our other sessions or episodes, that means this, right? A season where you may be going really hard for a time, right? Lane, we're in the process of launching a new app that's going to be so freaking amazing. And I've already let you know, and you better be ready to be off balance for a while, right? Told you as a team, like don't be showing up thinking y'all about to be just, y'all know I love you. But I'm about to be coming for you after hours at times because we have a deadline and we have a really important thing we got to hit. And so if I'm going to be accused, not to say you guys would, but this is a thing that happens in the workplace. Oh, this is a too hard of driving of an organization, and they don't honor, you know what I mean. So I think it's some of this is also about knowing where is your expectation and how you're even defining what we mean by balance, harmony, workaholism, because there are cases where you all might look at someone who's working a lot and call it workaholism, and I would argue that it is not. Amber, what you think?
I agree. I was sitting here thinking personally in my journey of this life, right? And obviously, when my kids were younger, I was in college and I'm working and I'm doing all of these things. But when they got to middle school, I came home. I was at home and I was a bit able to be at home, and that was my focus. So when we talk about harmony, so I worked really hard. And then when they went to high school, went back into, okay, I got to do this extra thing, right? But now I'm even working harder because I don't have any kids at home. So also understanding in this harmony of where there's time periods of where you're going to be working more or less. Or like you said, you have a deadline, right? You have this deadline, so that I need to do a little bit more. I think the especially when we're talking about helpers is that they feel like they can not do it. And I think that's where the issue is. Like if I don't do it, something's going to happen to my client, or something's going to happen to the organization, or it is all they it's like they're holding this to me. This is where the issue comes in, is when they're holding this on their shoulders as if it's their crisis or their problem, right? And so to me, that's when oh, wait a minute, we got to figure out what's happening here, because that's not harmony. You shouldn't be holding all of this, right? So yeah, it's definitely harmony, not don't try to get in that balance. I don't know what that balance is looking like, because there's, like you said, no such thing. There's no such thing as balance.
So, Lane, I'm curious based on the question you ask and my tough love response to some of your generation's perspectives. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think well, I hear you, and I do think that a lot of this new movement is, as everything goes with with movements, like there
One
is,
extreme to the other.
it's an extreme, and it's like I don't believe that everything that's being done on the like topic of work life balance is positive. I really don't. I think that there is a level of like, we do live in a world where career and being successful in career, primarily if you're working towards that it does require some level of imbalance at times, and I think that that is getting lost. And I think that I don't want to say that like everyone who's trying to live a better life is trying to like ascribe to this like unrealistic extreme, because I think that there are plenty of people who are just using this movement in order to evaluate more of what is maybe not so great in their lives right now, and that there is another way. So even my dad, for instance, who lived his whole life in a place of what someone might call workaholism based on the stats that I was giving at the beginning, this whole movement is actually impacting him in a positive way. I think he is actually being able to see that even though maybe he's not going to be in his career for so much longer before retirement, like he's still able to evaluate, how do I want to spend the last few years in my career? Do I want to be working every Sunday, or do I want to be working on vacations with my family? Like there are certain things that he has been able to question more, and I think it's just about evaluating in your personal life the that you have permission to question some of this, that it isn't just how it is. And I think,
Yeah, I agree.
yeah, I think if you want career success, which if you're listening to this right now and you probably do in some way want some level of career professional success, I think that's who we're speaking to in Joy Society primarily, are professionals, leaders, business owners, people who care about their professional sphere. That that in this world, I think it isn't going to happen if you just are focusing so much on constant balance, because
Yeah.
balance, if you're constantly trying to balance every of the 8 spheres in your life, you're never going to go all in on one thing. And I think that that's where we even see with, for instance, your emotional sphere. There might be a period where you do need to go all in and be imbalanced a little bit towards the emotional sphere, because you need to focus on that right then. It's the universe is telling you that's what you need to be focused in on. So I think, to your point, it's about the seasons and figuring out when is the time to really focus in, and when is the time where you do need to check down and say, this is not sustainable, or this is not how I want to live my whole life, or that such and such area is like truly suffering because I've focused so hard on my work. And then to
Well,
speak, oh yeah, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, and I would say beyond people who are focused on and care about, as you said, their career sphere. Because let's be clear, whether you like it or not, this world works the way it works, and you have to have some money in
Mm-hmm.
order to do and be certain things. And so you might not be all in necessarily on the career space, right? That's not necessarily your big dreaming about whatever. But I mean, Amber and I have had many talks about this lately,
Mm-hmm.
but you have some desires for your children, or you have some physical health realities that you need to address, and it costs money to deal with that. And so, how do you then get the money to pay for it? And we don't have to love the way that our world works, but it does work this way. And so, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not out here saying that the world makes sense, or that it should be that we have to do so much and go so hard, especially as a minority or a double minority, to get a couple dollars to even be able to pay some bills. Yeah, it'd be nice if it weren't that way, but it is. And so the other concern that I have is when folks, because they don't agree with the way things are, right? Then they're saying, "Well, I'm not going to do that." But your choice to not do that has you and your family suffering. And so some of this is just simply about, what does it take to get what you need in life? And it may not be that you necessarily want or care about a big name in your career or whatnot, but you do care about your children being able to experience life beyond your neighborhood, or you do care about you and your spouse being able to travel together and make memories beyond your neighborhood. And so then that costs money. And then that brings us back to work
Yeah.
or some sort of
Mm-hmm.
hustle in order to do it. So I think there's also the reality of, sometimes and I'm a disruptor, so I'm here for disruption. But you got to still live this life knowing that whether you like it or not, the world works the way it does. And until further notice, you better figure out how to maneuver this world as is, while we hope that we make some change and perhaps things are better. But if you are, locking in on, I'm going to be balanced, but yet you broke, and then your children can't get what they need, but you over here with your sign up, and you just standing your ground, and you're also emotionally distraught because you're in this constant battle to try to get change now. I would argue that that's probably not the best thing to be doing in order to find your way to where you want to go. And so there's balance in the idea of searching for, but also accommodating and recognizing that certain things just are the way they are. And so making your decisions accordingly is certainly in order. So again, what matters to you? Because if these things matter, then and you are like, I'm not doing the whole work in more than 40, well then that means you made that choice, and then your organization doesn't necessarily have to follow along with you. That's going to be on you to go find the place to work, right, that
Mhm.
accommodates how you want to roll. So you might have to change your whole career, because if you've decided, you put your foot down, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that, then you coming up bucking against a system within an industry that can't even accommodate that kind of stuff. Because I do consulting and coaching, so I know the other side of employees having these asks, but the logistical reality of the work you do does not allow for that. So you coming and complaining every week is not going to change it, because the way in which this business operates would prevent us from ever operating that way. So that's really the employee's question of, is this the right space for you? And that's really not either one of the employee or employer's issue. It's just probably not a good fit. And so I think some of this is also about being able to honestly assess, right, and not
Mhm.
getting so caught up in something needs to change. Maybe it's you that needs to change, and maybe it's you that needs to shift to a different organization or industry that aligns with what's important to you. On the flip side, like if you're a hard driver and you work at an organization where you really can't get it in, and you want to do your thing, you might have to go somewhere where that type of work ethic
Mhm.
and grind is saluted and sought out. Amber, I see you with lots to say in our last few minutes before we wrap up.
No, I was just thinking about basketball. So interesting. So when you're trying to make that 3 point, whatever the layup, whatever you're trying to make. So you're bouncing the ball down the court. That's your goal, right? So if that's working, if that's what whatever the goal is, I had that I'm trying to reach for it, right? But you got to watch that crossover game. What's your crossover looking like? Because when your crossover is correct, well, I got to move differently at times in my life, you're going to get that basket differently. So if you think you're going to just go up and down the court, ain't nothing going to come at you, ain't no defender's going to come to you, you ain't getting nowhere. No, pay attention to your crossover game. Do that, you good. But don't think that you just going to be able to go down there and ain't not going to come back to you. So
Yes, I love that analogy.
that's my
I love it.
suggestion for the end there.
Yes, and I think that sums it up, Amber. Again, that's really I think it's a great analogy of what I'm saying. Like there's what we want the world to be and what it is. And so I'm all about aspiring for and pushing the envelope for change and for things to be different. But if you go too hard into that world, right, then you do miss the fact that I don't care who you you are never, to your point, you never gonna be on the court, and you not gonna there won't be defenders. It's just not a thing. I would love for that to be the case, and then we're out of jobs, and that'd be great. But that's not how it is. So I would also, just as we wrap up, again, we could have hit this from several different angles, because there are folks who are grinding this out. It's not because your employer's a certain way. It's because you have somehow gotten to a point where this is all you know, and you have literally placed your whole identity in what you do and in your work. And Lane, I can't remember. We'll put it in the content afterwards, which episode that was, that we talked about codependency and how it shows up in the workplace. But it
Yeah.
does make me think about that profile of a person who is finding all of their value in their work. And so for those of you who are literally just living and dying by your role at work, I admonish you to just take a pause and ask, what's the why? Why is it that your work is such a priority, and such a primary driver in the defining of you? And thinking about my mom, who finally just retired in the last couple months, she couldn't do it because her entire identity was tied up in her work. So she didn't have anything
Mhm.
to walk away to. She didn't have, I mean, the kids got grown, and she didn't have hobbies, she didn't have any of those things. And so just being able to detangle yourself, ask yourself, who am I? And you are not what you do. You are not what you do for a living. So if you are not what you do for a living, then who are you? And if you ask yourself that question, I am quite sure you will have a long pause and you'll be like, holy crap, I don't know. And that's okay because most people don't know that answer, but that would be your homework. Ask yourself, who am I outside of your role? And outside of your role, not only at work, but your role as a parent or in a relationship with others. Who are you as a human standing alone? Who are you? To help you really get to some of these answers, to then also know then what is important to you, and be able to select something that works for you, right? Because it's truly aligned with who you are as a human. Lane, anything you want to add before we wrap up today?
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that you both just said. I think adding in the helper perspective as well, I do think that that is primarily because, like, Liz, you were talking about how, like, sometimes it's about getting out of the environment that you're in because that isn't supporting you in the kind of balance that you personally want. I think sometimes when we talk about the helping professional or certain other industries as well, it is primarily like an inside job, as far as like you need to figure out how do you approach your work differently, because it isn't always about, the because if you switch to a new place, like, chances are you're going to fall back into the same patterns. If you're especially getting something from it, like Amber, the first thing you said on this episode, just like, what are you getting from it? Why are you, like, what are you getting out of your work? And I think that's the question that people could meditate on when they leave this, is just, what are you getting from it? Because if you switch to a new place, you might think that it could be better, but you may end up falling back into the same pattern of imbalance in ways that you don't want to be imbalanced. So that's
Yeah.
really what it is. I think we've talked a lot about in other episodes as well, like the codependency one, the burnout one, especially ways to kind of, become more holistically balanced. So I think
Mhm.
that's where we'll leave it. And I'm interested to hear everyone's thoughts on this.
Yeah, that's a good call, Lane, because sometimes folks just you run into the
Mhm.
next thing to get the same outcome. So
Mhm.
hopefully you feasted on several of these different ideas that we gave you to think about. I will lastly throw out, for those of you who are like, damn, I need to do a little better though, I would just encourage you to start small. Even if you just walk away from your desk for 15 minutes a day, you will be surprised of some of those small tweaks because this is big. And so it's hard to just make major type shifts, but just start small. So if it's just that you leave 5 minutes earlier, on those days that you tend to stay till 12 or something like that, just find something super small to kind of self disrupt, to kind of get yourself headed in the direction of slightly more harmony in your work and personal reality, as a starting point. So, thank you all for sticking with us. We can't wait to hear what you think. See you soon.
Thank you.